Hello, K.Jolie Crochet Basics, and in this episode we're going to assemble a Glarbin. So this pattern's available on my Etsy's, but even if you're not into Glarbin, you don't purchase it, that's fine. Check it out. I do have tips and tricks and stuff like that, and some fun stuff with the shaping for his head. So if you're going to make a frog, you know, and even the feet. Okay. Alright, so the first Glarbin I did several of the bodies in different colors and different colored yarns and stuff. So I have my body right here, all my bits and bobs ready to go to assemble him, to start assembling him. So his legs, his arms, his belly patch, his feet, all the things. Alright, but we're going to start with the body to get going. And we'll go from there. So on the body, or the head rather, really, you would start stuffing. You can, no, you don't have to start stuffing right this second, you know, but I'll show you how I did the shaping and how to close him up. And it's so funny to me because it looks like a frog. Without closing it up, it looks like a frog. Well, it's supposed to look like a frog, right? So what you would do is your ending tail, to start off with, your ending tail, you would weave it in and out on the very edge with a darning needle or a yarn needle of some sort, okay? All the way through, just through where your chain ones are and your single crochets and stuff like that, all the way through on the first side. And you'd pull it tight and cinch it up, okay? So you cinch it up. So here's what it looks like flat, and then here's what it looks like cinched up. Alright, and I'm gonna hold off right there and thread more yarn and work the other side. And I don't think the camera's picking up the color. This is a light sage that I did this in. Alright, so we're going to repeat the same, what we just did, we're going to repeat on the other side. So you'll thread more yarn on the other, on the needle, and weave it in and out on the other side, just at the very edge. I don't think it really matters how much, you know, just in between the rows, how much you weave it in and out for the cinch. I don't think it really matters on that, because it'll cinch anyway. So you have it flat, pull tight, cinched. That's what it looks like, cinched on both sides. So what you're going to do here is you're going to start to close it up, and you're going to do a little on one side and a little on the other side, just sewing through your very top edge here and the very bottom of that. And make sure you're, one, make sure you're getting a good connection, and two, you know, make sure you're shifting this piece, the top piece, as you go to make it match up. Because with the shaping on some of these characters, you really have to be clever to get it, to get the shaping you want. So once you get it going on one side, then go on the other side and start doing the same exact thing. And you want to meet in the middle, and you're going to leave that open for stuffing. So you can start stuffing, you know, once you get the hole a little bit closed, you know, closer, meeting in the middle, then you could start stuffing. But if you need to, you can always pin in the center so that you know you're going to be even. So that's what it should look like as you're sewing it. So from here you could start getting some stuffing up in there. So I always go for the polyester. Polyfill is usually the brand that I have, but this time around I have loops and thread. So you don't want to like, I'm going to wrestle with this bag to get the stuffing out. You don't want to go crazy with the stuffing at this point, you know, because we're going to, you know, we're not sealing it up now. And also, when you work the amigurumis, the plushies, stuffed animals, dolls, whatever, you'll know that once you start sewing the pieces on, it flattens out the stuffing. So I always try and leave a hole open like until I'm totally done as I can be. But you just want to fill the cavity. And if you're into frogs, I do have another frog pattern coming out, not Glarbin, not, you know, a different type of frog. This one I think inspired me. And also, you know, spring is going to be coming and all that kind of thing. But if you get, like, you know, up to the chest filled, stuffed, and then go from there. And we'll close up this hole a little more and we'll start working the other bits and bobs. Stuff like that. Alright, actually, no. Actually, get my pattern going. So, I mean, we're trying to match up the pictures, and that's where we're going with this. So you'll get it, you know, as like maybe an inch, you'll leave an inch or so, you know, for stuffing. So you leave the, you know, it open for a bit while we're sewing the pieces on. You know, I never know if I put too many pictures in or not enough pictures, you know. I try and get pictures of all the important stuff and everything. And then this time around, when I was printing it, the first draft of it, I was like, wow, these pictures are huge. Like, I put, like, almost, like, I put really big pictures in for some reason. And I was, like, thinking, I was like, wow. Maybe they're too big. Like, what am I thinking, you know? But it's easier to meet, like, in the middle and make sure you have it, like, you know, the way it's supposed to be and not, like, cockeyed or lopsided or whatever. If you do, like, sew on one side and then sew on the other side, sew on one side, sew on the other side, you know. I mean, some people are total experts and don't even have to bother with that. They get it right the first time, you know. Not everybody is that good at that. And that's okay. Because I mean, I did it this way because I'm not good at it. So, there's that. And then also it'll shape differently once it's completely stuffed, you know, so it might look crazy now or whatever, but, you know, once it's stuffed, it's not going to be a thing. Stuffed. But that's the craziness of what it'll look like. Okay. Let's see. Alright, I want to get some stuffing in, and you want to get some stuffing in under the lumps, the eyes, the top of the head, so that we can sew the eyes on. And with these, the eyes are always almost always the first thing to go on is the eyes when you're sewing these dolls and stuff. My pattern, like other people's patterns and stuff like that, because that's going to dictate where everything else is going to go. Because if you got the eyes, you know, you could have everything whatever, and then if you sew the eyes crooked on last, then you're going to end up having to pull it out and all the things. But you do want to get the stuffing underneath there, underneath the top of the shaping. Alright, but you will have more time to stuff later on as long as you leave that loop, that little hole open, and go from there. You want to try and keep the stuffing fluffy. Not all stuffings are the same. I say this all the time. Not all stuffings are the same. They're not, some are more dense. And also, if you overstuff and you push it down, then they become dense. And you want to try and have like a fluffier piece for most projects, I think. For most stuffed animals and stuff, you know. Especially like stuff like this where we're going to be sewing through the pieces, you know, so you got to be able to get that needle through the pieces to sew it, and if it's too dense it becomes a struggle. So this becomes the back of the head actually. I'm going to pin it closed for now. Okay. So where the seam is, you want to follow over, and right here is where you want to put your eye, your first eye. So we have our eyes. And these I chose actually to do the pupil. I chose to do that last because it's a straight line, I thought it would, if I sewed one crooked, I'd have to cut it out. So I figured I would rather struggle in the end, you know, to get the needle through rather than do it, you know, beforehand and then possibly have a crooked eyeball. Alright, but you would see where you want it. Follow your seam over. This is where we attach. We're going to follow our seam over and we'll start sewing it on. And it's not sewn flat, it's sewn as a bubble. And then you're going to stuff it right before you finish up sewing it. So you want it higher up, but you're going to be able to get more stuffing under it. So don't, like, you know, don't fret. You know, just try and make sure you got good attachment going around, because we are going to stuff it, and you don't want the stuffing to, you know, nobody likes when their stuffing falls out. And more or less like as round as you can get it, I guess. Wait, am I out of frame that whole time? As round as you can get it? I hope I was not out of frame. I got the camera up higher today so that I'm not right in your face. But I am looking down and not through the viewfinder. So if I do go out of frame, I apologize. And I must say, I think this one is a bit forgiving, because you can always put a spot there, because he has all the spots on his back and stuff like that. So, am I too far over? I feel like I'm too far from the side. Alright, I'm going to go with it. Okay, so at this point, if you want to get a little stuffing under it now, just to make sure that you have the shaping going good and stuff like that. And not, you know, not a tremendous amount, just a little fluffy fluff. We're not going to lose our minds trying to get stuffing under an eyeball. Alright, but that'll also help, you know. And usually I try and get the needle like underneath the shaping. I think I get a little nervous doing these assembling videos, actually, because they're not like the pattern videos, you know. They're different to do them. In a way. Because the piece has to move, you know, so much. It's not, when I do the patterns, my hands are you know, my arms are stationary. My hands are moving, my arms are stationary. But now doing this, you know, the piece is moving all over the place, so that, you know, I can adjust it and sew where I need to sew and all of this. So I think that's why it makes me a little nervous. Why I get a little nervous doing these. And then, of course, you know, these are meant to be helpful, so you don't want, I don't want to show you something and be like, you know, that was a silly thing. Where is my pencil? Okay. And I showed you this last time, but if you're new to me, a pencil with an eraser. The eraser seems to catch the fibers and helps push the polyfill, or the, you know, the polyester in place. So, handy dandy pencil with an eraser will do you. And that works on the arms and the legs and all of that kind of thing for the stuff as you go type of situation. If you forget to stuff as you go, or you can't stuff as you go, that helps out quite a bit. All right, and let's see. There's a stitch here. All right, and you can push that down, and even we're gonna sew the if you didn't sew the pupil yet, we'll sew that later on, no big deal. But I always either run my nail around the piece or a hook or the needle to make sure that I got a good connection. Alright, and then you'll just feed your needle through. Come out in between a stitch. Come out in between a stitch, not through a stitch, in between a stitch. Make a couple of knots and then pull the yarn back in, and that'll hold in place. Okay, you'll go right back in where you came out of. Come out through a different one. Pull that knot in. You pull the knot in, and you can either just feed this in or snip it off. Your choice. But what I usually do is I'll usually pull this out a little bit like a tug and snip it right up on the stitches, and then it'll suck that thread right back in and you don't have to give it a second thought. Okay, so first eye is on. And because it's stuffed, you know, you're going to have to adjust. Either way, you're going to have to adjust, blah, 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 stuffing moves. Alright, so but what you would do is you would follow this one across and you would sew your next one on. Alright, so I'm going to sew my next one on and we'll move on from there. So just follow the row across to over here, and you know that's where you're going to start sewing in your next eye. Alright, moving on. Alright, so I just wanted to show you when you're sewing the second eye on, whatever it is, you know, the project. Alright, if whenever possible, like, you know, follow it over. So I did. I followed it over. Wow, I got a crazy stitch in there. Okay, and then as you're doing the top, you would follow that one over. And on this one, it kind of is easier to follow it over just because of the way the stitching is. I can't say all of my patterns are that, you know, good as far as that's concerned. So this one's stuffed, this one's not. You know, but as I'm sewing it on, like I'm puffing it up, popping it out to make sure that it's going to line up. You know, all right, so just a tip or a notification or whatever you want to call it. Okay, because I just pulled this, I just started sewing this the second eye, and then I realized I was too far over from the edge. So I always say, like, have your ruler and stuff like that so you can measure, because you can actually measure it. You know, here's where your seam starts. So you can measure it on both sides to make it short, to make sure. So that's always a bonus to always have your, you know, to be able to measure it out and not have it mess up. I'm really sewing these eyes funky today. I think because I'm doing it on camera and the piece isn't sitting in my lap like usual. Because usually the pieces are on my lap. I'm sitting in a regular chair. Alright. I'll stuff this one and we'll go on, move on to the next thing. Alright, my eyes are in place. You can always add more stuffing, you know, to the piece and all of that to make sure that you're good. You can measure it out on the sides. That's always helpful. And also follow the rows over, underneath, and across. And then when you do the pupils, if you did them already, or when you do them, you know, you'd follow across. You'd follow across. So now I have on my paper that I did the face right after. I keep hitting my light, sorry. But actually the belly patch I think is the best place to go once you have your eyes in place. You know, and this all goes by like your skill set. Like if you feel more comfortable, like you're, you know, if you've been doing amigurumis super long time and you're like, nah, I'm good, whatever, you know, then that's how you do. Okay, but you do want the belly patch to go like across where the curve is, where we stopped increasing. That's where it's gonna go. And then let me see, I thought I counted down. Oh no, I'm counting the wrong thing. That's what I'm doing here. The stuffing. All right, so you're gonna count up from your very bottom, so you can count the rows. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So between row 11 and row 12, okay, and you know, I don't use regular straight pins. I use the ones with the bobble heads if I ever have to sew, because I've been stabbed before, and I've, you know, left a pin in and been stabbed before. And I know I bought these pins with the bobble heads, the bright colors, but I don't know where I put them. So there's that. Anyway, point being is this should be, from the eyes down, should be about 1 inch when you're sewing it. Okay, so just to show you, stop hitting the light. All right, so just to show you, it is approximately 1 inch. I'm trying to show you here. Let me zoom in a little. I'm trying not to zoom in so that you could see more of the project itself, but it is about 1 inch. And we count it up from the bottom. Okay, so you would thread your tail, your ending tail. I usually use the tails because I don't really care for weaving in, so as much, you know, whenever I can use the tail to do it, I will. And then sometimes I will anchor it with the starting tail. If I have like a little bit of starting tail or whatever, I'll anchor it in place. But you want it to follow the row of cross, and you want to eyeball it as far as centering it, you know, where the eyeballs are. Okay. Okay. All right. So you would sew all the way around, and what I try to do is sew it on an angle so that the needle's coming like out and then going, you know, as close to the whatever I'm sewing as possible when it comes to these patches and stuff like that. All right, but you want to get it all the way around. You know. And this this kind of thing, it is better to actually pin it, you know, with the big bobble pins and stuff, just so, because it's going to shift as you're going. But I'm just going to use my starting tail just to anchor it a little bit in place, and I'll pull that out as I work around, and we're going to start across the top and down. But even though it, you know, you just want to check your progress, make sure you're catching the whole piece as you're going. So that's not bad. Now, I don't know what it's called. I'm not really like a sewer, so I don't really know, but I always kind of go back and then forward, if that makes sense. You know, especially like this, I want it to be across the row here that I can see it. So I don't really know if that's a name for that, a back stitch or something, because it's not sewing fabric, you're sewing yarn. But however you want to sew it on, And I know I'm catching because I just pushed stuffing out. So I know I'm catching both pieces together. And this part was a little bit of a pain in the butt because I kept catching on the eyeballs. But it's better when the eyeballs are in place so that you could see where you're going with it. So, if you haven't, please subscribe. Check out my patterns. I have patterns here. I have patterns on Etsy's and all of that. And I just restarted my fan page on Facebook because I either deleted it or it got disabled or whatever happened. I'm not sure exactly, but I had had it up there for years, and then somebody was looking for a pattern, and I was like, oh, my Facebook page is gone, because on the Instagram, whenever I post on the Instagram, it posts on the Facebook, so I don't really give it a thought. Alright, now that I have it across, I'm going to sew regular. I'm going to just sew regular now, and not like that, not like what I just did. But I always try and pick the piece and get it underneath, as underneath as possible. And you'll continue on all the way across, and I'll meet you back. But check your progress, even if you pin it and all of that, check your progress for shifting and all of this, because with the stuffing and all of that, it'll shift and move and everything. So now with the belly patch, as you're sewing it, a little stuffing underneath, optional if you want to give it a little puff or, you know, push out and stuff like that, totally optional. But I think it does help a little bit with the shaping and stuff, you know. Not a ridiculous amount of stuffing, you know, just a little stuffing. Give the belly a little puffing and help with the shaping and everything. Alright, so just to show you, optional. Now when I was doing this one, I stuffed it. This one is not stuffed. So, your choice, really, if you want it to be more puffy, or, you know, however you want it to be. I wish the camera would pick up this color better, because I know it looks, to me in the viewfinder, it looks very gray. This looks gray. It's not, it's green. This is a light sage, and this is frosty green? Something like that. But after your patch is sewn to your liking, make sure, either with your nail or the hook or whatever it is, your finger, make sure it's all attached. I forgot what the word is. Make sure it's all sewn right and all of this. Alright? Because if you miss, what happens is you can get like a gap. Like you can have like a little gap there that eventually, like if you wash it and whatever, played with and all of that kind of thing, the gap can become more predominant. And other things can happen with that, I think. Alright. So moving on. So at this point we can do the arms or the legs. And I think I did the arms first here. But optional is stuffing under the belly patch. And also, you know, at this point you might want to add some more stuffing in your back to puff up and all that kind of thing. Alright, not terrible. I'm not necessarily the best sewer. And then I think I panicked a little bit. Sorry. Okay, life happens, right? All right, we'll go with the arms. So, you have your arms lightly stuffed, sealed on top with your tail. Thumbs facing forward, thumbs facing forward. And the arms are sewn on low on the body. I mean, this guy is almost all body, you know, like his head's like, everything is the body. 15 rows from the closing seam. So here's the closing seam. So approximately row 15 from the closing seam is where you're going to sew the arm. All right, so 2, 3, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10, 15. What'd I just do with my needle? Oh. I'm telling you, I make myself laugh. That's how like goofy I am. All right, so on the side, here's the pictures, the belly patches here. So you're going to sew down. And what you would do is after you get the first one in place, you would count down on the other side and then look down and make sure it's aligned. You know what I mean? All right. Is that too far forward? No, I guess not. All right. So just straight through the top and that row. And if your arms are too stuffed, what happens is if you got too much stuffing in your arms, it'll stick out. So if it does stick out and you're lazy, okay, you can always go through the arm higher up, right about here, and then through the body lower down and secure them in place. Secure them in places is what I'm going to say. All right, but you would just go through that row. Hooked on the eyeball again. Just straight through. Nice and tight. Like twice, like two times through the arm and the belly and the side of the body. Just to make sure you got it nice and secure. Because that's what we want. We don't want to lose an arm. And once you got it where you want it, okay, so just to show you, if you overstuffed, like I was just saying, okay, and I'll just show you right quick, you would go through further down, come up, go across a couple of stitches, come out that same row, okay, maybe not, get in there, all right, come out that same row, and then you would go through a few rows down and secure it. And you would do that a couple of times if you overstuff. Like if any doll or whatever, if the arm is sticking out like this, that's what you want to do. All right. So, but I did all right. I didn't overstuff this time. So I don't need to do that. But I've done that on quite a few dolls when I didn't realize I shouldn't stuff so high. Because that's what happens when you stuff like super high and you're like, oh no, you know, gotta stuff it full, but not all the way up, or you're making a scarecrow, essentially. All right, so just a tip or a trick. And I do that with when I make wings I do owls and stuff, birds and things. So when I do stuff with that, even though my wings aren't stuffed, sometimes just to hold them in place so that they're not you know, all over the place. And you also have to understand that a lot of this stuff I make for display. I'm not making it for, you know, unless I'm giving it to somebody. What am I doing with a frog? You know, what am I doing with a frog? Okay. You'll count down. And then you can do it across the back too. You can follow the row across if the belly patch is the problem. All right, and you would look down and sew on your other arm, okay? And even if, you can always take a string, you know, the tail, a string, a tape measure, and just follow it across that way, all right? To make sure your arms are even and stuff like that. That's for this project or any, you know, any project that has arms. Okay? So, let's see. Alright, so we'll sew the second arm and then we will move on to the legs and the feet. And then the face and the spots you can sew on whenever you like. And however many you like and whatever sizes you like. But I did put the sizes in there and the different breakdown for that. Alright, my arms are in place, my belly patch is there, the eyes are there, so more or less went across the bottom around the same row. Helps to keep the top from shifting, but I think I'm panicking. I think I get nervous and then I do the things. Okay, at this point we'll sew our legs on. And I don't have my feet sewed onto my legs yet. The reason being is because of the way the feet come out, I'll sew them on after my legs are in place, just so that I make sure that I get it, you know, in front and not, you know, like off to the side or pigeon-toed or whatever what do they call it, duck foot or pigeon foot, right? Okay. All right, the legs are fairly simple to sew on. Check for placement. Optional to wait for the feet to be sewn on first. Do it with, this is a tapestry needle. It has a long eye, which works great because you can squish down the yarn and pull it through. You just have to be careful you don't, what's the word? Skin it? Split it. You don't want to split the, you know, split where the strands are loose. All right, let's see. Put the feet. Do. Okay. So now if you want him to be like more where he can sit down, you would put the feet more forward, or, you know, if he's going to be standing up or laying down, you know, and it doesn't matter. Okay? But you just want to get them spaced. Spaced out. And then make sure you got, come on now. Make sure you got good stuffing in there. I don't know if I want to use this needle or the other needle. But they're sewn on open. And if you do want him sitting down, then close them up and sew them towards the front if you want him to be sitting down. So you can adjust accordingly. I just had somebody leave me a rating for Helen, for the Helen pattern. And she said that she sewed the legs more forward so that, you know, Helen could sit down. And I was like, perfect, you know, adjust accordingly to your needs and go from there. Sometimes if the stitches are too tight, you can't get the bigger needle through. So sometimes it's easier with the darning needle and sometimes it's easier with the tapestry needle. But I usually shy away from the plastic needles these days because they have a lot of give and wiggle depending on the brand, you know. And with stuff like this, you want it to be, you know, where it's supposed to be. Now you want to make sure it's in all the way around, and what I'll do is go underneath where I'm catching the body, come out as close to the leg as possible, and then go back through the leg, you know, as close to the leg as possible, and then go back through the leg just a couple of times just to make sure it's, you know, extra secured and stuff. Alright, but then you would do the push the tail out through the other side and knot it and all of that. Okay, and then you would repeat for the second leg, lining up, and go from there. Alright, so after your second leg is in place, that's how that's going. Alright, let's do the feet. So this is what the foot looks like already sewn. And this is what it looks like after it's crocheted. So, where's the other? Oh, here it is. Okay. So just to show you, once it's crocheted, you take the ending tail, thread it on a needle, fold it in half. You take the foot, you fold it in half, line it up, fold it in half, okay, and then just sew through, no stuffing, just sew through. I should really get rid of that tail, because this is what happened the last the last foot, all the feet. Okay. And then you'll continue to seam it up. Just the front to the back. I just pulled that right out. In between the toes. Okay, and then even though it's crocheted closed on this side, I still went through just as a precaution for shaping, more or less, I still went through on the crocheted side, seaming it up and bringing the sewing tail down to where you're going to use it for the foot to attach. Okay, now from here, as low as you can go without being on the very bottom is what you want to do. And you'll get rid of that tail, that starting tail, but as low as you can go without being on the very bottom. And if you need to, you can always do the needle trick where you cinch it up. If you feel like it's too wide, or you're, what's the word? Where you can, alright. If you need to, you can always do what we did with the back of the head, or the sides of the head, or whatever, and just weave the needle in and out across the, bottom of the back of the foot where the ankle is, and then cinch that if you need to. You might feel like, oh, it's too wide, or I'm not getting a good placement because it's wider, so if you needed to do that, just a tip or a trick or whatever. All right, and then the toes go on top, the sewn part. The toes go on top, the sewn part goes on the bottom, and then as low as you can go. I'll just put it through the wrong way. On the wrong side here. As low as you can go without it being on the bottom of the foot, like hanging off. And then however easy it is. Easy is not the word. Your skill level is what you want to go by. However you feel comfortable doing it. And once you start that row, like the row here, just go across in and out of that same row, and then through both pieces, both sewn pieces on the foot, the front and the back. Make sure you're getting a good connection there. I caught my toes. Okay. And then you'll repeat this for the second foot, of course. Just always check, when you're sewing the pieces, always check your progress to make sure you're getting it where you want it to be, type of situation. Okay? Because you don't want to start sewing, have the piece shift, and then the next thing you know, the foot is somewhere. The foot's in another state. Okay? It's in another area code. Or the eyeball's in another area code, stuff like that. Alright, so you'll repeat this for the second foot. Now, as far as that's concerned, and then you'll weave in your tails. So just to move this along, as far as the face, I threaded a needle with black yarn, and you could do black or brown, dark brown, because sometimes the black is very stark against the other colors, and it makes it look not right. I don't know how to say. Like, it looks so stark, but for the eyes, you would just thread on a needle. I might need to use a darning needle for this. I'm catching stuffing here. Now what I did with this one here is I did it all one. This is all one thread. I came in through the eye, I went underneath, came out, I did two stitches through each eye. I went in through the eye, came underneath, did the stitches in this eye, came out, did the eyebrow, the mouth, and then the other eyebrow. So this was all one thread. I don't know if you want to do that because I don't know if you want to give that a shot, because honestly it was a pain in the butt. And what happened was, once I don't have a picture of it, but the first face that I did, it looked bad. And so it wasn't just taking out the mouth. It was taking out both eyes and redoing both eyes, the eyebrows and the mouth. Like, it wasn't just, you know, because I had used one string to do the whole thing. It wasn't just, it wasn't, you know, I had to redo the whole thing because it was one yarn. So what you want to do is go across, and you want to get it across that starting circle is what you want to do. All right, and you can adjust this after. Not going that way, going this way. So sometimes if it's too far, you want to pull that like nice and tight. Okay, and adjust it before you do anything, you know, however you want it to look. All right, but it's too far for me to get the needle all the way, so I'm coming out here, and then I'm going to come out through the eye. And if you have one of those markers, the ones that they use in sewing when you're or chalk when they do the lines to where to sew and stuff like that, that could also help. You know, that could also be a good thing. All right, let's see. Here's coming out too close to the center here. I think that's too close. Let's see. There you go. Lots of tricks. Lots of tricks. Because it is a pain in the neck. Once you have something you're sewing and whatever, and you're like, oh, you know, and then to have to fix it or cut all the things out, you know, if you got slightly, you know, off or skew or whatever it is, you know. So, and you'll adjust that because there's stuffing in there. Okay. And go straight across. And on this one, you do want to pull a bit tight so that you know, ooh, drop my needle, so that you know it's in. And then you can, if you're going to do the eyebrows, optional, of course. The mouth is a curved. The first mouth, the first one that I did on the face, the mouth looked like a funky mustache. That's why I ended up redoing it, because it looked funny to me. But he's got little eyebrows if you're interested, you know. And that'll show more once it's stuffed. And you can go down and do the mouth. And then the final thing, the final piece is the spots. Now with the spots, you can do the placement however you like, more or less, because the spots change. As far as I can tell, most of the spots change with each episode, with the exception of one that's usually right by his left eyeball and one that's usually under his right arm. So this one is usually there, and that's usually there, a spot under his arm. But on some episodes he has this on both sides, you know, so, and then he has more on the back on some episodes. He has a whole sprinkling on his back. So those, you know, they're in the pattern, the sizing to make, plus the one big one for under the arm. But really that's like a wherever you want to do it type of thing. It's a little crooked. Go a little wider. Okay. And then you would just finish up. Finish the face, finish, sew on the spots wherever you like. You're going to sew on the spots just like, no, go wider. You're going to sew on the spots just the same way you sewed on the belly patch. Yep, that's good. And we'll come out over the eye. Follow the row over. I might be a little high on that one. Yep. Yep. And before you, you know, ooh, I pulled it in too hard. You can always pop it out with a needle. But, more or less, that's his face. When you are finished weaving in and whatever, and you're going to finish closing up, make sure you shove, before you do the head spots, before you put the head spots on, you'll close this up. But before you do that, make sure you take the stuffing and shove it up and under his eyes, and pop that, really pop the head out, the head shaping out behind the eyes. To fill it out. Okay, and then, you know, you'd sew the spots on the bottom, and then before you sew the spots on the top, you would seal this up and weave in. Alright, so I think that's about it as far as this is concerned. You know, you would sew on the other foot, you would sew your spots, weave in all ends, and go from there. I don't think, let's see, I didn't, oh, I got the whole thing right here. I didn't really cover much on the spots because, again, he's got one big one, and then, you know, as many as you want to put on, different sizes. And in the pattern itself, I got the smaller one, the medium one, and then the extra large one. And then you just sew them on the way that you sew the belly patch on, and you're good. So you weave in all ends, and then have a good time with yourself. All right. So with that, I'm going to say thank you so much for watching. As always, happy hooking because it keeps you off the streets and keeps you out of trouble. Like, subscribe, whatever you like. I have more patterns coming out. I have another frog I'm working on for spring. Not a Glarbin or whatever, just my own design. And I'll be back real soon with my next tutorial. And have a super great day. K.Jolie, Crochet Basics, Assembling Glarbin. Take care now. Ciao.